Get your hands off me! The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Right there, in the middle of a five-star hotel lobby, chandeliers above, marble beneath, and a black man in a leather jacket being dragged toward the door like a criminal, his crime ordering room service. The hotel manager smiled, arms crossed, watching security haul him away. People like him, she announced to the watching crowd, don't belong here. She had no idea she just handcuffed her own boss. What happens next will satisfy you deeply. Before we continue, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels tonight. The handcuffs bit into his wrists. Cold, tight, deliberate. Marcus Carter didn't fight them. He stood in the center of that grand lobby, arms pinned behind his back, and he let them do it. Let the two uniformed officers grip his shoulders like he was dangerous. Let the hotel manager watch with that smug little smile. Let every guest in the Regency Grand freeze mid-step and stare. He'd been here before. Not this lobby, not these cuffs, but this moment. He knew it like an old scar that never stopped aching. Move, one of the officers said, shoving him forward. Marcus took one step, then stopped. I said move. I heard you. His voice was low, calm, the kind of calm that made people nervous because it didn't match the situation. A man in handcuffs should be panicking, pleading, explaining himself. Marcus Carter did none of those things. He just stood there, spine straight, eyes forward, breathing like a man who had all the time in the world. Behind the polished reception counter, the hotel manager, Sandra Whitmore, according to her gold nameplate, clicked her tongue impatiently. Mid-40s blonde hair, pulled tight designer suit that cost more than most people's rent. She'd worked her way up in this industry for 22 years, and she ran the Regency Grand like her personal kingdom. Tonight she'd found an intruder. Officers, she called out loud enough for the lobby to hear, I want him off the property in the next 5 minutes. If he resists, call the police. Ma'am. The younger officer hesitated. He hasn't actually done anything. He's trespassing, he's harassing my staff, and frankly, she looked Marcus up and down, making no effort to hide her disgust. He doesn't belong in an establishment like this. Look at him. Marcus felt the words land. Look at him. 53 years old, gray touching his temples, leather jacket worn soft from years of use, jeans, work boots, no Rolex, no designer labels, nothing that screamed money or power or please treat me with respect. Just a black man standing in a white marble lobby being told again that he didn't belong. Sandra. Her head snapped toward him. Excuse me, you don't get to use my name. Sandra, he repeated slower this time. I'm going to ask you one more time. Check the reservation. Suite 1708. Under Carter. I already checked. There's nothing. Check again. She laughed. Short, sharp, designed to humiliate. Sir, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but it's not going to work here. We've seen it before. People flash cards they can't afford, claim reservations that don't exist, and expect us to just hand over a penthouse suite. She shook her head. Not on my watch. A young clerk behind her nodded eagerly. That's right. We have standards. Standards, Marcus repeated. Yes, standards. He let the word hang in the air for a moment. Let it settle over the watching crowd like dust. Then he inhaled slowly, chest rising, and turned his head just enough to scan the lobby. Guests clustered near the fountain, drinks frozen halfway to their lips. A family with 2 young kids, the mother pulling them close. A businessman lowering his phone, frowning. A teenager in a hoodie, camera already raised and recording. Good. Let them watch. Let them all watch. 3 hours earlier, Marcus Carter had walked through the revolving doors of the Regency Grand, wearing the same clothes he'd worn to visit a construction site that morning. No suit, no driver, no entourage of assistants announcing his arrival. Just a man with a phone in one pocket and a folded receipt in the other. The lobby had barely noticed him. A few glances quickly dismissed. He didn't look like the typical Regency guest, the hedge fund managers in Italian wool, the trophy wives dripping diamonds, the tech executives who tipped in hundreds just to feel important. Marcus looked like someone who'd wandered in from the street. And that was exactly the point. For 6 months, reports had been landing on his desk. Complaints forwarded from guest services. Anonymous tips from employees. Screenshots of reviews that never made it past the internal filter. Stories about guests being randomly selected for additional ID verification. Stories about families moved to less visible tables in the restaurant. Stories about a black businessman being asked three times if he was sure he had the right room. The Regency Grand was one of 47 properties in the Meridian Hospitality Group. Marcus had built that company from nothing. 28 years ago, he'd started with a single 12-room motel off I-95, bought with money he'd saved washing dishes and driving delivery trucks since he was 16. Now Meridian operated luxury hotels across 4 continents, 15,000 employees, $2 billion in annual revenue. And somewhere along the way, Marcus had stopped visiting his own properties unannounced. Stopped seeing what his staff actually did when they thought no one important was watching. That ended tonight. He'd walked up to the reception desk at 7:47 p.m., hands in his pockets, voice quiet and polite. "Evening. I'd like to check in. Carter Suite 1708. The clerk, young guy, maybe 25 name tag, reading Tyler, had looked up from his computer with a smile that faded the moment his eyes registered Marcus's face. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" "Carter, Suite 1708. Tyler typed something, frowned, typed again. "I'm not seeing anything under that name, sir." "Try again." "I've tried twice. There's no reservation. Marcus Carter, Suite 1708, executive level. I booked it myself 3 days ago." Tyler's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He glanced sideways at a colleague, then back at Marcus. "Sir, our executive suites require verification. Do you have ID? A credit card?" "You need my ID to confirm a reservation I already made. It's policy." "For everyone? Or just for me?" Tyler's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wait while I get my manager." Marcus didn't argue. He stepped aside, leaned against the counter and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Guests came and went, checking in with smiles and swift efficiency. A white couple with designer luggage breezed through in under 3 minutes. A group of businessmen in matching blazers got upgraded to a corner suite with a complimentary bottle of champagne. Marcus stood there, waiting, invisible. When Sandra Whitmore finally appeared, she was already frowning. "Is there a problem here?" Tyler leaned in, lowering his voice, but not enough. "This gentleman claims he has a reservation in the executive suite. I can't find it in the system. And frankly," he glanced at Marcus, "I'm not sure he's being truthful." Sandra's eyes swept over Marcus like a barcode scanner reading something defective. "Sir, what's your name?" "Carter." "First name?" "Marcus." She typed, squinted at the screen, typed again. "I'm showing nothing under Marcus Carter." "Then your system has an error." "Our system doesn't make errors." "It's making one now." Sandra straightened her smile, hardening into something sharp. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but I've been running this hotel for 7 years. I know every reservation that comes through these doors, and I can tell you with absolute certainty." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "You do not have a suite here. You are not a guest. And if you don't leave in the next 60 seconds, I will have security escort you out." Marcus felt something old and familiar rising in his chest. 25 years old again. Standing outside a conference hotel in Atlanta, watching the doorman shake his head. "Sorry, sir. We're fully booked." Even though his reservation was confirmed. Even though he was the keynote speaker. He'd slept in his rental car that night. Delivered his speech the next morning in a wrinkled suit, running on 3 hours of sleep and a decade of suppressed fury. That memory had never faded. It had calcified into something harder, something that drove him to build an empire where no one would ever be turned away for how they looked. And now, here he was, standing in his own hotel, being told he didn't belong. "I'd like to speak with the general manager," he said quietly. Sandra's smile twitched. "You're looking at her." "Then I'd like to speak with corporate." "Corporate doesn't take calls from—" She stopped herself, recalibrated. "From non-guests." "From non-guests," Marcus repeated. "That's correct." He nodded slowly. "I see. I'm glad we understand each other. Now." Sandra raised a hand, and two uniformed security officers materialized from somewhere near the concierge desk. "Gentlemen, please escort this man off the property. He's refusing to leave." "I haven't refused anything." "You're trespassing." "I'm standing in a public lobby. This is private property." "It's my property." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Quiet. Almost casual. But Sandra caught them, and her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." Marcus shook his head. "Nothing. Forget it." No. What did you just say?" She stepped closer, voice rising. "Did you just claim this hotel is yours?" "I said forget it." "You did. You said my property." Sandra turned to the watching crowd, arms spread wide like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. "Did everyone hear that? This man—" She jabbed a finger toward Marcus. "This man just claimed he owns the Regency Grand. Unbelievable." Laughter rippled through the lobby, nervous, uncertain. But laughter. Tyler shook his head, smirking. "Some people will say anything." "Sir," Sandra continued, "I don't know if you're delusional or just running some kind of con, but I can promise you the owners of this hotel are a publicly traded corporation, not some random man in a leather jacket." Marcus said nothing. "Officers." Sandra's voice cracked like a whip. "Cuff him." The first officer hesitated. "Ma'am, we can't just—" "He's trespassing. He's making fraudulent claims. He could be casing the property for all we know." She lowered her voice just enough for the officers to hear. "Do you really want to be responsible if something happens later?" The officers exchanged a look. Then the older one reached for his belt. "Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Marcus felt the cold metal close around his wrists. Click. Click. And for a moment, just a moment, he was 25 again. Atlanta. Alone. Humiliated. Swearing to himself that one day things would be different. They were different now. He just hadn't shown them yet. "That's enough." The voice came from near the elevator. A woman, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her name tag read Elena, and she was clutching a tablet like a shield. Sandra whirled around. "Excuse me." "I said that's enough." Elena's voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "I've been watching this for 20 minutes. He hasn't done anything wrong." "He's trespassing." "He's not." Elena glanced down at her tablet. "I ran the name again. Marcus Carter. Suite 1708. It's there. It's been there the whole time." The lobby went silent. Sandra's face flickered confusion, then fury. "That's impossible. I checked myself." "You checked the wrong system. His reservation is in the executive override section. Owner-level clearance." Elena looked up, meeting Sandra's eyes. "It's flagged VIP. The highest tier we have." "VIP." Tyler laughed nervously. "Come on. Look at him." "I'm looking at the screen." Elena turned the tablet around so everyone could see. Marcus Carter, Suite 1708, Executive Override, Owner Clearance. For the first time, Sandra's composure cracked. "That doesn't mean anything. Anyone can—" "Ma'am." Elena's voice hardened. "Owner clearance means exactly what it sounds like. Only 3 people in the entire company have that designation." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The CEO, the chairman of the board, and the founder. The lobby had gone completely still. Even the fountain seemed quieter. Sandra stared at the screen, then at Marcus, then back at the screen. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible." Marcus Carter, hands still cuffed behind his back, finally spoke. "You should have checked the system before you put me in handcuffs, Sandra." His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but every word landed like a hammer. "You should have checked before you called me a fraud, before you told your staff I didn't belong, before you announced to this entire lobby," he gestured with his chin toward the watching crowd, "that people like me don't deserve service." Sandra's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't know." "That's the problem." Marcus took a step toward her, chains rattling softly. "You didn't know. You saw a black man in a leather jacket, and you decided you knew everything you needed to know. You decided I was a scam, a threat, someone to be removed." "Sir, my name is Marcus Carter. I founded Meridian Hospitality Group in 1997 with a 12-room motel and $40,000 in debt. I built it into one of the largest hotel companies in North America, and the Regency Grand." He glanced around the lobby, the chandeliers, the marble, the gold trim. "I bought this property 8 years ago. I signed the paperwork in a conference room 2 floors above where you're standing right now." The teenage kid with the phone had pushed his way to the front, camera still recording. "Holy shit," he muttered. "So yes," Marcus continued. "When I said this is my property, I meant it literally. Every floor, every room, every employee badge." He looked directly at Sandra. "Including yours." Sandra's face had gone white. "Mr. Carter, I am so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known, if you'd known." Marcus shook his head slowly. "That's exactly the point, Sandra. You didn't know. And because you didn't know who I was, you treated me like a criminal. You put me in handcuffs, in my own hotel." He let the silence stretch. "Now imagine how you treat people when you know they're nobody, when you know there's no consequence." Sandra's eyes glistened. "I've made a terrible mistake." "You've made several." Marcus turned to the officers who were standing, frozen hands still on his arms. "Are you going to take these off, or do I need to call my legal team?" The older officer fumbled for his keys, nearly dropping them twice. "Sir, Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry. We were just following orders." "You were following prejudice dressed up as orders. There's a difference." The cuffs clicked open. Marcus rubbed his wrists, rolling his shoulders slowly. The red marks would fade. They always did. But some things didn't fade. Some things stayed with you forever. He pulled out his phone, pressed a single button, and held it to his ear. "Rachel, it's me." A crisp voice answered immediately. "Sir, I've been monitoring. What do you need?" "Full protocol. Log everything. Timestamp this moment. And alert the board. I'll have a report on their desks by morning." "Understood. Anything else?" Marcus looked at Sandra, then at Tyler, then at the 2 officers who had just spent 5 minutes treating him like a suspect. "Yes," he said quietly. "Prepare termination documents. Multiple." Sandra's gasp was audible across the lobby. "Mr. Carter, please." "You had every chance to do the right thing." He slid the phone back into his pocket. "You chose this instead." The lobby hummed with whispers. Phones were everywhere now, recording, streaming, capturing every second. The teenager in the hoodie had pushed his way to the front, narrating into his camera. "Yo, I'm at the Regency Grand right now. They just put the owner in handcuffs. The owner. This is insane." An older man near the bar called out, "Sir, we saw everything. That was wrong. Completely wrong." A woman with a stroller nodded fiercely. "I filmed it. All of it. If you need witnesses." Marcus raised a hand, quieting the rising chorus. "Thank you. All of you." His voice was steady, but something flickered beneath it. Something old, something tired. What you witnessed tonight isn't rare. It happens every day in hotels and restaurants and stores across this country. The only difference is that tonight there were consequences. He turned to Elena, the young employee who had spoken up. You. What's your name? Elena Vasquez, sir. How long have you worked here? 14 months. Marcus nodded. You were scared to speak up. I could see it. But you did it anyway. That's not easy. Elena's eyes welled. I couldn't just stand there. It wasn't right. No, it wasn't. He studied her for a moment. I want you in my office Monday morning, 9 a.m. We're going to talk about your future. Her mouth fell open. Sir, you showed courage when it was risky. That's rare. I need people like you. Sandra made a sound something between a sob and a protest. Mr. Carter, please. I've worked here for 7 years. I made one mistake. One mistake. Marcus turned on her, and for the first time his voice carried heat. You humiliated a guest in front of dozens of people. You ordered him handcuffed without evidence of any crime. You stood there and told everyone in this lobby that he didn't belong here. He stepped closer. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. A choice you've probably made 100 times before with people who couldn't fight back. Sandra's face crumbled. You never meant to get caught. That's different. The lobby was absolutely silent. Marcus looked around at the guests who had witnessed everything at the staff, frozen behind the counter at the phones still recording. This hotel was built on a promise, he said quietly. A promise that every guest who walks through those doors will be treated with dignity. Not because of their clothes, not because of their credit card, not because of the color of their skin, but because they're human beings who deserve respect. He paused, letting the words settle. Tonight, that promise was broken, and everyone responsible will be held accountable. Rachel's voice crackled through his phone speaker. Sir, I have confirmation. All access credentials for Sandra Whitmore, Tyler Jensen, and Officers Morrison and Blake have been suspended. They're locked out of all systems effective immediately. Sandra stared at the reception desk. Her computer screen had gone red. Access denied. Tyler grabbed his badge, swiped it frantically. Nothing. This can't be happening, he whispered. Marcus slid the phone back into his pocket. It's happening. He turned toward the elevators, pausing one last time to address the crowd. To everyone who recorded this, thank you. The world needs to see what prejudice looks like when it thinks no one is watching. He straightened his jacket, the same leather jacket they'd judged him for. And to anyone who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere, your dignity isn't up for debate. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. He walked toward the elevators, footsteps echoing on marble. Behind him, Sandra Whitmore sank into a chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Tyler stood frozen at the counter, badge hanging useless from his hand. The two officers had already slipped out a side door, unwilling to face what came next. And in the center of the lobby, a dozen phones continued recording, streaming the aftermath to thousands of viewers who would share it with millions more. Marcus Carter pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. He stepped inside alone, and as the doors began to close, he allowed himself one small breath. He'd spent 30 years building something. Tonight, he'd remembered why. The elevator doors closed, and Marcus Carter let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, not from anger, from something older. Something he'd spent decades trying to bury beneath boardroom victories and quarterly earnings reports and the quiet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. He looked down at his wrists. The red marks from the handcuffs were already fading, but they'd leave bruises by morning. He'd have to wear long sleeves to the board meeting. Explain nothing. Let the lawyers handle it. That was the smart move, the CEO move. But standing alone in that elevator, watching the floor numbers climb, Marcus didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a 25-year-old kid in a wrinkled suit sleeping in his rental car outside an Atlanta hotel, wondering if he'd ever be good enough. The elevator chimed. Floor 17. He stepped out into the hallway, walked to suite 1708, and pressed his keycard against the lock. Green light. The door swung open. The penthouse was everything the Regency promised: floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Italian marble in the bathroom, a bed that probably cost more than most people's cars. Marcus had stayed in 1,000 rooms like this. He'd designed half of them. Tonight it felt like a prison. He sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his jacket, still wearing his boots, and he pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from Rachel. 47 text messages. His email inbox was already exploding. Board members, lawyers, PR consultants, all wanting to know what happened, what he planned to do, how they should spin this. Marcus ignored all of it. Instead, he scrolled to his photos and found the one he was looking for. A faded image scanned from an old Polaroid. A young black woman in a waitress uniform standing outside a diner in Memphis, Tennessee, smiling like she had a secret. His mother. She'd worked doubles at that diner for 18 years. Raised Marcus and his 2 sisters on tips and prayers. Never complained. Never stopped believing that her kids would have it better. She'd died 11 years ago, 3 months before Marcus made his first billion. She never saw the hotels, never saw his name in Forbes, never got to stay in a penthouse suite and order room service just because she could. But she'd seen enough. She'd seen him get followed through department stores, seen him pulled over for driving a nice car in the wrong neighborhood, seen him come home from job interviews with that particular look on his face, the one that said they'd smiled and shaken his hand and promised to call, and they never did. "Baby," she used to tell him, "the world's gonna try to make you small. Don't let it. You're bigger than anything they can throw at you." Marcus stared at the photo for a long moment. Then he set the phone down and walked to the window. 17 floors below, the city glittered like nothing had happened. Cars moved through intersections. People walked their dogs. Somewhere a siren wailed and faded. The world kept spinning. But in the lobby of the Regency Grand, Marcus knew chaos was just beginning. Sandra Whitmore couldn't stop shaking. She sat in the small office behind the reception desk. Mascara-smeared hands trembling around a glass of water she couldn't bring herself to drink. Her computer screen still glowed red. Access denied. 3 words that had ended her career in less than a second. "Sandra." The voice came from the doorway. Gerald Morrison, the senior security officer, stood there looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "We need to talk." "Talk?" She laughed, but it came out broken. "About what?" "How we just handcuffed the man who signs our paychecks. How we're all going to be on the news by morning." Gerald stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I tried to tell you. I asked if you were sure." "Don't!" Sandra's voice cracked. "Don't you dare stand there and pretend you had doubts. You put the cuffs on him. You. Because you ordered me to. And you could have said no." They stared at each other, 2 people drowning in the same water, each trying to push the other down to stay afloat. Finally, Gerald sank into a chair. "What are we going to do?" Sandra shook her head. "I don't know. I've been trying to think. Maybe if I apologize, really apologize, get on my knees if I have to. He's a businessman, right? He understands mistakes." "That wasn't a mistake, Sandra. You know it. I know it." Gerald's voice dropped. "We saw a black man in casual clothes and we assumed the worst. That's not a mistake. That's who we are." The words hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Sandra wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself. She wasn't racist. She had black friends. She'd hired diverse staff. She'd taken the sensitivity training courses. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the video. The dozens of phones that had captured every word, every sneer, every moment of her announcing to the lobby that people like him didn't belong. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A text from her sister. "Oh my God, Sandra, is this you? It's everywhere," followed by a link. Sandra clicked it with numb fingers. The video had been posted to Twitter 14 minutes ago. It already had 200,000 views. The comments were a wall of fury. Fire her immediately. This is disgusting. Boycott Regency. She put him in handcuffs. In his own hotel. Imagine treating the man who owns the building like a criminal because he's black. This is America. Sandra dropped the phone like it had burned her. It's over, she whispered. It's all over. Gerald said nothing. There was nothing to say. In the lobby, Elena Vasquez was still standing behind the reception desk, but she felt like a different person than she'd been an hour ago. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her heart had stopped racing. Something had shifted inside her. Some wall she'd built to survive in this industry had cracked, and she wasn't sure yet what would grow through the gap. Hey. She looked up. The teenager with the phone, the one who'd been live streaming, was standing at the counter. He couldn't have been older than 17, with a hoodie that said State Champion, and eyes that looked older than his face. I'm Keith, he said. I just wanted to say, what you did was cool, speaking up like that. Elena shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just told the truth. Yeah, but nobody else did. Keith glanced around the lobby, which had mostly emptied now. A few guests lingered near the bar, talking in hushed tones, but the spectacle was over. I've been watching stuff like this my whole life. People see something wrong and they just freeze, or they look away, or they tell themselves it's not their problem. I almost did that. But you didn't. Elena looked at him. Really looked at him. You were filming the whole time. Why? Keith's jaw tightened. Because my dad got pulled over last month. 3 cops, guns drawn. They made him lie face down on the asphalt for 20 minutes because his taillight was out. He paused. A taillight. He's 52 years old, works at the post office, never had a parking ticket in his life, and they treated him like he was about to shoot up the block. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, be angry. Keith held up his phone. This video has 300,000 views now. By morning, it'll be millions. And every single person who watches it is going to see exactly what happened here. They're going to see a man get handcuffed for ordering room service. They're going to see that manager smile while she did it. And maybe some of them will think twice next time. Elena nodded slowly. Do you really think it'll change anything? Keith's smile was tired, too tired for someone his age. I don't know, but my dad always says you can't just wait for the world to get better. You gotta record it, document it, make people see what they don't want to see. He tucked his phone into his pocket. Anyway, thanks for speaking up. It mattered. He walked toward the exit, and Elena watched him go. 300,000 views. She thought about Marcus Carter alone in that penthouse suite, carrying the weight of 1,000 moments like this one. And she thought about herself standing behind this counter for 14 months, watching things she knew were wrong and saying nothing. Not anymore. She pulled out her own phone and started typing. Marcus was still standing at the window when his phone rang. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. He answered. Sir, I need to update you on the situation. Go ahead. The video has gone viral. Major news outlets are picking it up. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, everyone. We've had inquiries from 63 journalists in the past 40 minutes. She paused. This is going to be the story tomorrow. Maybe the story of the week. Marcus closed his eyes. What's the board saying? Mixed. Henderson wants to issue a statement immediately. Full apology, distance the company from the employees involved. Thompson thinks we should wait. Let the news cycle play out before we respond. And what do you think? Rachel was quiet for a moment. That was one of the things Marcus respected about her. She never rushed to fill silence with noise. I think you should tell your story, she said finally. Not a corporate statement. Not PR language. Your story. Who you are. Why you were there. What it meant to you. That's personal. Yes, and that's why it'll matter. Marcus watched the city lights blur as a plane crossed the distant sky. I've spent 30 years keeping my personal life out of the business, building a brand that's bigger than me, letting the work speak for itself. I know, and it's worked. But this moment is different. Rachel's voice softened rare for her. People aren't just angry about what happened in that lobby. They're angry because they've lived it, or their fathers have, or their sons. You have a chance to show them that someone who's been through it can still rise, can still build something, can still stand in a room full of people trying to tear him down and refuse to break. Marcus said nothing. Sir, if you don't mind me saying, I've worked for you for 9 years. I've seen you handle hostile takeovers, market crashes, lawsuits that would have destroyed anyone else. You never flinched. But tonight, when I watched that video, she trailed off. What? You looked tired. Not weak, just tired. Like you'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Marcus let out a slow breath. I have been. Then put it down. Just for a moment. Let people see what you've been carrying. Let them understand. The silence stretched between them. I'll think about it, Marcus said finally. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. Depositions for all staff involved. Full review of the hotel's practices over the past 5 years. And Rachel. Sir. Thank you. For monitoring. For being ready. That's my job. No. It's more than that. He hung up before she could respond. Down in the lobby, Tyler Jensen was having a breakdown. He'd retreated to the employee break room, where he sat on a plastic chair staring at his phone, watching his life implode in real time. His Twitter mentions were a nightmare. People had found his name from his badge in the video. They'd found his LinkedIn, his Facebook, his Instagram from college where he'd posted photos from a fraternity formal with captions that hadn't aged well. People like him pull this all the time. His own words replayed thousands of times, screenshotted, quote, tweeted, torn apart. Dude, you're done. Tyler looked up. One of the other clerks, Jamie, who'd been smart enough to stay quiet during the whole thing, stood in the doorway. Thanks for the support, Tyler muttered. I'm serious. This isn't going to blow over. You called a black CEO a scammer on camera, in his own hotel. Jamie shook his head. My cousin works in HR at a big law firm. She said people are getting fired for way less than this. Stuff they said 10 years ago. You said it tonight, on video, while he was in handcuffs. Tyler felt his stomach lurch. I didn't know who he was. That's not the point, man. You treated him like a criminal because of how he looked. That's the point. That's the whole point. I was following Sandra's lead. And where is Sandra now? Locked in the back office crying. She's gonna throw you under the bus so fast, watch. She'll say she was just doing her job, that you were the one making the comments. Tyler's hands started shaking. What am I supposed to do? Jamie shrugged. Lawyer up. Delete your social media. And start praying this doesn't follow you for the rest of your life. He turned to leave, then paused. You know what the worst part is? That guy, Mr. Carter? He probably came in looking normal on purpose, testing us, seeing how we'd treat someone who didn't look rich. And we failed, all of us. You didn't say anything. No, I just stood there and watched. Jamie's voice was quiet. That's almost worse. He left, and Tyler sat alone in the break room staring at his phone as another 1,000 notifications piled up. 3 floors up in a conference room that had been hastily commandeered, the hotel's remaining senior staff gathered around a speakerphone. This is a disaster. The voice belonged to William Chen Meridian's chief operations officer, calling from his home in Connecticut. It was nearly midnight, but no one was sleeping tonight. The video has 4 million views and climbing. Every major outlet is running with it. Our PR team is getting buried in calls. What do they want to know? Asked Janet Phillips, the Regency's head of guest services, who'd arrived 20 minutes ago, looking like she'd run through traffic. Everything. When did Mr. Carter arrive? Why was he dressed that way? Was this a setup? Did he plan to expose discrimination in his own hotel? Did he? William's sigh crackled through the speaker. I don't know. I've known Marcus for 8 years, and I've never seen him do anything like this. He's usually careful, strategic. This feels different. Janet leaned forward. Different how? Personal. Like he wasn't thinking about optics or stock prices or brand reputation. Like he was just fed up. Silence fell over the room. Finally, someone spoke, a young woman named Diana from the legal department. Sir, what happens now to the employees involved? That's up to Mr. Carter. Technically, termination has already been processed for the manager, the clerk, and the 2 security officers. Their access has been revoked. But formal separation, severance, legal releases, all of that still needs to go through channels. Will there be lawsuits? Almost certainly. Sandra Whitmore's been with the company for 7 years. She'll probably claim wrongful termination. The security officers might try to argue they were following orders. William paused. But none of that matters compared to what could happen if this becomes a civil rights case. If Mr. Carter decides to push this, if he files a formal complaint, goes to the EEOC, involves civil rights attorneys, this could be the biggest discrimination case in hospitality history. We'd be defending ourselves for years. Janet's face went pale. Would he do that, sue his own company? I don't know. William's voice was heavy. But I watched that video 3 times tonight. And the Marcus Carter I saw wasn't just angry about what happened to him. He was angry about everyone it's ever happened to. That's a different kind of anger. The kind that doesn't settle for quiet payouts and internal reforms. The room fell silent again. Marcus had finally taken off his jacket. He sat on the hotel room couch, undershirt damp with sweat he hadn't noticed until now, and he stared at his phone. The screen showed a text message draft he'd been writing for 20 minutes. It was addressed to his daughter Simone. She was 26 now, working as a public defender in Chicago. Sharp as a knife, and twice as stubborn. She'd inherited her mother's eyes and her father's refusal to back down from a fight. She'd also inherited his tendency to carry things alone. Baby girl? The message began. Something happened tonight, and I wanted you to hear about it from me before you see it online. He stopped. Deleted it. Started again. Simone. I got handcuffed in one of my hotels tonight. They didn't know who I was. I'm okay, but I'm not okay. Does that make sense? Delete. I've been thinking about your grandmother a lot tonight, about all the things she went through that she never told us about, all the small humiliations she swallowed so we wouldn't have to carry them. I really thought that by the time you grew up, things would be different, that the world I was building would be different. It's not. I'm sorry. He read the words. Then he deleted the whole thing. Some conversations weren't meant for text messages. He'd call her tomorrow, hear her voice, tell her the truth that her father, for all his success, for all his money, for all his power, had stood in a marble lobby tonight and felt like nothing. And that was something no penthouse suite could fix. So, in the lobby, the last of the witnesses were finally leaving. Keith, the teenager who'd live-streamed the whole thing, was walking toward the parking garage when his phone buzzed. A text from his mom. Where are you? It's almost midnight, he typed back. Sorry. Got caught up in something. On my way. Another buzz. A notification from his streaming account. His video had hit 10 million views. Keith stopped walking and stared at the number. 10 million. That was more people than lived in most cities. More people than he'd ever speak to in his entire life. And every single one of them had seen a black man get handcuffed for existing in a space where he was supposed to belong. His phone buzzed again. A DM from a verified account, a journalist at the Washington Post. Hi Keith, I'm reaching out about the video you posted tonight. Would you be willing to do a short interview about what you witnessed? We're working on a story for tomorrow's edition. Keith read the message twice. Then he typed back, Yes, Jay. Sandra Whitmore was still in the back office when the knock came. She looked up. Her eyes were swollen. Her makeup destroyed her career in ruins. "Come in," she said, not caring who it was anymore. The door opened. It was Gerald Morrison again, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman stood behind him, mid-30s, dark hair, dressed in a suit that screamed corporate. "Mrs. Whitmore," the woman said. "My name is Patricia Liu. I'm from Meridian's legal department. I've been sent to collect your personal belongings and escort you off the property." Sandra felt the words land like physical blows. "Right now it's midnight." Mr. Carter's instructions were explicit. All terminated employees are to be removed from the premises immediately. You'll have the opportunity to collect your belongings, but your access to all Meridian Systems properties and personnel has been permanently revoked. "Can I at least—" Sandra's voice cracked. "Can I at least speak to him? Explain." Patricia's expression didn't change. "Mr. Carter has declined all requests for communication. Any further contact should be directed through legal counsel." Sandra looked at Gerald, hoping for something support, sympathy, anything. He looked away. "Fine," she whispered. "Let me get my things." She stood, legs unsteady, and walked to her desk. 22 years in this industry. 7 years at the Regency Grand. A corner office with a view. A nameplate in gold. All of it gone in 60 seconds. She opened her desk drawer and began removing photos. Keepsakes, the small things that had made this space hers. A mug from her daughter's preschool. A framed certificate from some leadership conference. A card from her team on her 5th anniversary. "Thank you for everything, Sandra. You're the best boss we've ever had." She wondered how many of them had watched the video by now. How many were texting each other, distancing themselves, preparing their own defenses. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Patricia's voice was patient but firm. "We need to go." Sandra picked up the last item, a small photo of herself at last year's company gala, shaking hands with some executive she barely remembered, and tucked it into her purse. Then she walked out of the office she'd spent 7 years building, past the reception desk where Tyler was being escorted out by another attorney, through the lobby, where the fountain still whispered like nothing had happened. The revolving doors pushed her out into the night. The city was cold. The street was empty. And somewhere 17 floors above her, the man she'd tried to throw out was probably sleeping in a bed that cost more than her car. Sandra Whitmore stood on the sidewalk and cried. But Marcus Carter wasn't sleeping. He was standing at the window again, watching the lights of the city, thinking about his mother and his daughter and every humiliation that connected them across generations. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Sir, the video has hit 15 million views. The story is leading on every major network. I've had requests for interviews from 60 Minutes Today Show and NPR. Also, staff have been removed from the property. Legal documentation is in process." Marcus read the message. Then he set the phone down without responding. 15 million people had watched him get handcuffed tonight. 15 million people had seen the manager's smirk, heard the clerk's accusations, witnessed the security guards grab his arms like he was dangerous. Tomorrow there would be more. Think pieces and hot takes and social media arguments about what it all meant. People would debate whether it was staged, whether he'd provoked it, whether the staff deserved sympathy because they didn't know. None of them would understand what it felt like to stand in that lobby. None of them would understand the specific loneliness of being successful and black in America, of building an empire and still being treated like an intruder, of wearing the right clothes and saying the right things and working twice as hard as everyone else and still watching people decide in half a second that you didn't belong. His mother had understood. She'd spent her whole life understanding. "Baby," she used to say, rubbing his shoulders after another bad day. "You're gonna have to be better than them just to be equal. That's not fair. It's just true. But don't let it make you bitter. Let it make you strong." Marcus had tried. God, he had tried. But standing in that lobby tonight, wrists aching from the handcuffs, listening to Sandra Whitmore announce that people like him didn't belong. He'd felt something crack inside him. Not his resolve, not his dignity, his patience. He was done being patient, done being the model minority, done smiling through slights and accepting apologies that didn't change anything. Tomorrow he would make a statement, not a corporate press release written by lawyers. His story, in his words, and then he would burn down every policy, every practice, every unwritten rule that had allowed this to happen. Not just at the Regency Grand, not just at Meridian, everywhere. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Carter. My name is Keith. I'm the kid who filmed what happened tonight. I just wanted to say my father got treated the same way last month. Cops. Guns drawn. For a taillight. He's 52. Works at the post office. Your video is at 20 million now. People are listening. Thank you for not letting them erase you. Marcus read the message 3 times. Then he typed back, thank you for being a witness. Tell your father his story matters too. He set the phone down. 20 million views. Tomorrow the whole world would be watching. And Marcus Carter had a lot to say. The sun hadn't risen yet when Marcus Carter gave up on sleep. He'd spent the night drifting in and out of memories, each one sharper than the last. His mother's hands rough from years of work, smoothing his collar before his first job interview. The look on his wife's face the day he told her he was buying his first hotel. His daughter Simone, 7 years old, asking why the man at the store followed them down every aisle. Because he's afraid of what he doesn't understand, baby girl. And that's his problem, not ours. He'd believed that then. He still believed it now. But belief didn't make the weight any lighter. Marcus showered, dressed in the same clothes from yesterday. The leather jacket, the jeans, the boots that had apparently disqualified him from service in his own hotel, and rode the elevator down to the lobby. It was 5:47 a.m. The morning shift had just started. The woman behind the reception desk looked up as he approached, and her face went through about 6 emotions in 2 seconds. Recognition, fear, shame, more fear. Mr. Carter, she stammered. We weren't expecting. Can I get you anything? Coffee, breakfast. I can have the kitchen. What's your name? She swallowed. Maria. Maria Gonzalez. I've worked here for 3 years. Were you here last night, Maria? No, sir. I work mornings. But I saw... She trailed off, unable to finish. You saw the video. Everyone's seen the video, sir. Marcus nodded slowly. What did you think? When you watched it? Maria's eyes dropped to the counter. Her hands were trembling slightly the way Elena's had trembled last night before she found the courage to speak up. I thought it could have been me. What do you mean? My brother. Maria's voice cracked. He got stopped last year, walking home from work. They said he matched a description. He's 43 years old, works at a grocery store. They pushed him against a wall and searched him in front of everyone. She looked up, eyes wet. When I watched what happened to you, I thought about him. I thought about all the times I've seen guests treated differently and said nothing because I needed this job. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You need this job to survive. Yes, sir. And speaking up could cost you everything. Yes, sir. So you stayed quiet, because the system made silence safer than truth. Maria nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. Marcus leaned forward, resting his hands on the counter. Maria, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because the system that kept you quiet is the same system that put me in handcuffs last night, and I'm going to tear it down. She stared at him. How? One policy at a time, one hotel at a time, one conversation at a time. He straightened. Starting today. His phone buzzed. Rachel. Sir, the media requests have tripled overnight. We're at 47 million views on the primary video. CNN wants you for a live interview at 9 a.m. The NAACP has issued a statement of support. And, she hesitated, and the board has called an emergency meeting for 10 a.m. They want to discuss the company's response. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm sure they do. What should I tell them? Tell them I'll be there. And tell CNN I'll do the interview. But I'm doing it my way. Understood, sir. He hung up and looked at Maria one more time. Thank you for being honest with me. Mr. Carter. Yes. I'm glad it was you, in that lobby last night. She wiped her eyes. I'm glad it was someone who could fight back. Marcus didn't respond. He just nodded and walked toward the restaurant where the breakfast service was just beginning, and the staff watched him pass like he was a ghost made flesh. 47 million views, and counting. The CNN studio was cold and bright, all white walls and cables, and people rushing in every direction with clipboards and headsets. Marcus sat in a chair that was designed to look comfortable on camera, but felt like sitting on a board while a young woman dusted powder on his face and apologized 4 times for the inconvenience. We're so honored to have you, Mr. Carter. This story is everywhere, literally everywhere. My mom called me at 6 a.m. to ask if I'd heard about it. What did you tell her? That I was going to be doing your makeup in 3 hours. She laughed nervously. She didn't believe me. A producer appeared tapping a tablet. Mr. Carter, we're live in 8 minutes. Lisa Chen will be conducting the interview. She's reviewed the footage extensively and has some questions about. I know what she's going to ask. The producer blinked. You do. She's going to ask if it was staged, if I plan to expose my own hotel, if I'm going to sue, if this is about race or policy or both. Marcus looked at him steadily. She's going to ask everything except the one question that matters, which is, how many times this has happened to people who weren't CEOs, people who didn't own the building, people who got thrown out and had no power to do anything about it. The producer was quiet for a moment. That's actually a good angle. It's not an angle, it's the point. 2 minutes, someone shouted. The makeup woman scurried away. The producer retreated to his station. And Marcus sat alone in the chair, bright lights bearing down on him, thinking about all the interviews he'd done over the years. Business profiles, magazine features, keynote introductions. None of them had felt like this. None of them had mattered like this. We're live in 60 seconds. Lisa Chen took her seat across from him, all professional warmth and practiced empathy. She was good at her job. Marcus had watched her work before, and he respected that. But he also knew she was here for ratings, not revolution. That was fine. He'd use her platform anyway. 30 seconds. Lisa leaned forward. Mr. Carter, thank you so much for being here. I know this has been an incredibly difficult 24 hours. It's been clarifying, Marcus said. There's a difference. She tilted her head, intrigued. Can you explain what you mean by that? In 10 seconds I will. The red light blinked on. Good morning, America. I'm Lisa Chen, and we're here with an exclusive interview with Marcus Carter, founder and CEO of Meridian Hospitality Group, who last night was handcuffed in the lobby of one of his own hotels after staff refused to believe he was a guest. The video has now been viewed over 50 million times. Mr. Carter, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. Let's start with the obvious question. When you walked into the Regency Grand last night, did you know this was going to happen? Marcus took a breath. This was the moment. The first words out of his mouth would shape everything that followed. I knew something was going to happen, he said. I just didn't know what. For 6 months I'd been receiving reports about discriminatory treatment at my hotels. Guests being questioned, families being relocated to less visible tables, people being asked repeatedly for ID that other guests weren't asked for. He paused. I needed to see it for myself. So you went undercover, essentially. I went as myself, just without the suit and the entourage and all the signals that tell people I'm worth respecting. His voice hardened. I wanted to know how my hotels treat people when they don't know they're being watched. And I found out. Lisa nodded, scribbling a note. Walk us through what happened. Marcus told the story. The reservation that mysteriously didn't exist. The clerk who looked at him like he was a problem to be solved. The manager who smiled while she called him a fraud. The handcuffs. The public humiliation. The moment he revealed who he was and watched their faces crumble. And when you told them you owned the hotel, what was that moment like? It was satisfying. I won't pretend it wasn't. Marcus leaned forward. But here's the thing, Lisa. I shouldn't have needed to be the owner to be treated with dignity. The only reason I had any power in that situation is because I happened to be wealthy. What about the people who aren't? What about the man who just wants to take his family to a nice hotel for his anniversary and gets stopped at the door because he's wearing the wrong clothes? What about the woman who saves for months to treat herself to a fancy dinner and gets seated by the kitchen because they don't think she belongs in the main room? Are you saying this is systemic? I'm saying it's America. Marcus's voice was steady, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. I built a billion-dollar company. I employ 15,000 people. I've been on the cover of Forbes twice. And last night none of that mattered. Because I walked into a room wearing a leather jacket and someone decided in 2 seconds that I was a threat. Lisa was quiet for a moment. In the control room, Marcus could see the producer gesturing frantically, probably telling her to push harder, get more conflict, more drama. She ignored him. Mr. Carter, you've terminated 4 employees already. What happens next? Next, we change everything. Every policy, every training program, every hiring practice. I'm not interested in punishing individuals. I'm interested in dismantling the systems that made their behavior possible. Some critics are saying this was a publicity stunt, that you staged the whole thing for attention. Marcus laughed, and for the first time, there was real anger in his voice. A publicity stunt? I got handcuffed. In public. In my own hotel. My wrists are still bruised. He held up his hands and the camera zoomed in on the faint purple marks. Does that look staged to you? I'm just presenting what some people are saying online. And I'm presenting what actually happened. The difference is that I was there. They weren't. Lisa shifted tactics. Let's talk about the bigger picture. This video has sparked a national conversation about racial profiling in service industries. What do you want people to take away from this? Marcus thought about his mother. About Keith's father face down on asphalt for a broken taillight. About Maria at the front desk staying quiet because silence was safer than truth. I want people to understand that dignity isn't negotiable. It's not something you earn by wearing the right clothes or driving the right car or having the right job title. It's something every human being deserves just for existing. He looked directly into the camera. And I want every person watching this who's ever been made to feel small, who's ever been told they don't belong, who's ever been treated like a criminal for the crime of existing in a space where someone decided they didn't fit, I want them to know that I see them. And I'm fighting for them. Lisa was silent. The producer was silent. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Carter, Lisa said finally, that was powerful. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for giving me the platform. The red light blinked off. The interview was over, but Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. The board meeting was already tense when Marcus walked in. 12 people sat around a long mahogany table, and every single one of them looked like they hadn't slept. William Chen, the COO, stood at the head of the room, fidgeting with a pen. Margaret Hayes, the CFO, had her laptop open running numbers. David Thompson, the oldest board member, sat with his arms crossed, face unreadable. Marcus took his seat at the head of the table. Nobody spoke. I assume you all watched the interview, he said. Nods around the room. Good. Then you know where I stand. David Thompson leaned forward. Marcus, we need to talk about the stock. What about it? It dropped 4% this morning. Investors are nervous. They're worried about boycotts, lawsuits, brand damage. 4% is noise. It'll recover. That's easy for you to say. You own 38% of this company. Some of us have our entire retirement tied up in these shares. Marcus looked at him. David, how long have we known each other? 18 years. In those 18 years, have I ever made a decision that hurt this company? David hesitated. No. Then trust me now. Marcus stood walking to the window. What happened last night wasn't a crisis. It was an opportunity. Every major news outlet in the country is talking about Meridian right now. Every social media platform is sharing our name. We have more visibility than $100 million in advertising could buy. Visibility for being accused of racism, Margaret pointed out. Visibility for addressing it. Marcus turned to face them. Do you know what the comments are saying? Not just anger, hope. People are saying, finally a company that's taking this seriously. They're saying, I want to stay at a Meridian hotel because the CEO actually cares. They're saying, if he can fire his own staff for discrimination, maybe things really can change. William Chen cleared his throat. Marcus, the employees you terminated, Sandra Whitmore, is already talking to lawyers. She's claiming wrongful termination. Let her claim whatever she wants. We have the video. We have 50 million witnesses. That's not how legal works. She'll argue she was following standard security protocols. That she had no way of knowing who you were. She had every way of knowing. My reservation was in the system. She chose not to look because she'd already decided I didn't belong. Marcus's voice was ice. That's not a defense. That's a confession. The room was quiet. Finally, David spoke again. What exactly are you proposing? Marcus pulled a folder from his briefcase and dropped it on the table. A complete overhaul. Every hotel in our portfolio. New training programs focused on unconscious bias. Mystery shopper programs to test how staff treat guests of different backgrounds. Mandatory diversity metrics for management positions. And a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, not just in writing, but enforced. That's going to cost millions. It's going to make billions. Do the math, David. We're not just selling hotel rooms. We're selling an experience. A promise that every guest will be treated with respect. Right now, that promise is broken. I'm going to fix it. Margaret looked up from her laptop. The numbers actually support this. Companies that invest in diversity initiatives see an average of 19% higher revenue from innovation. And the PR value of this moment. This isn't about PR, Marcus cut in. This is about doing what's right. If it also helps the bottom line, great. But that's not why I'm doing it. The board members exchanged glances. Marcus could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. Risk versus reward. Principle versus profit. The old way versus the new. I need a vote, he said. All in favor of implementing the Dignity Initiative across all Meridian properties, say aye. Silence. Then William Chen raised his hand. Aye. Margaret Hayes nodded. Aye. One by one hands went up around the table. Even David Thompson, after a long pause, muttered, aye, under his breath. Motion carries, Marcus said. Meeting adjourned. He gathered his folder and walked toward the door. Behind him, he could hear the board members whispering to each other, already strategizing, already calculating how to spin this to their advantage. Let them spin it however they wanted. He had work to do. The call came at 3:47 p.m. Marcus was in his car being driven back to the Regency Grand when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. This is Carter. Mr. Carter. The voice was young, hesitant. My name is Tyler Jensen. I was the clerk, last night, at the desk. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. I know who you are. I know you do. Tyler's voice cracked. I needed to call you. I needed to tell you I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught. No, I mean, yes, but that's not... A shaky breath. I've been up all night, watching the video, reading the comments, seeing what people are saying about me. And I keep thinking about the moment I saw you walk in, what I thought, What I assumed. What did you assume, Tyler? Silence. Then, that you didn't belong there. That you were trying to scam us. That people who look like you don't stay in penthouse suites. His voice broke. I didn't even think it consciously. It just happened, like a reflex. That reflex has a name. It's called racism. I know that now. Tyler was crying. Marcus could hear it through the phone. I keep telling myself I'm not racist. I have black friends. I voted for Obama. But then I think about how fast I was ready to believe the worst about you and I. He trailed off, unable to finish. Marcus let the silence stretch. Part of him wanted to hang up. Wanted to let Tyler drown in his own guilt. The man had called him a fraud. Had smirked while security grabbed his arms. Had said people like him, like it was a diagnosis. But another part of Marcus, the part that had built an empire on second chances, recognized something in Tyler's voice. Not just guilt, shame. The genuine kind. The kind that might actually lead to change. Tyler? Yes, sir. I'm not going to forgive you. That's not my job. And honestly, I don't know if I could, even if I wanted to. I understand. But I'm going to tell you something my mother told me once. She said, the measure of a man isn't what he does when everyone's watching. It's what he does when he thinks nobody is. You showed me who you are last night. The question is whether that's who you want to be for the rest of your life. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. What am I supposed to do? That's not my problem to solve, but if you're serious about changing, really changing, start by asking yourself why you thought what you thought, not just about me, about everyone. Ask yourself what stories you've been told your whole life about who belongs, where, who deserves what, who's dangerous and who's safe. Marcus paused. And then do the work to unlearn them. Not for me, for you, because living with that kind of poison in your head is its own punishment. He hung up before Tyler could respond. The car pulled up to the Regency Grand. Marcus sat for a moment, phone still in his hand, thinking about the conversation. Thinking about all the Tylers out there, people who didn't think of themselves as racist, but carried the same reflexes, the same assumptions, the same instant judgments. Changing policies was easy. Changing hearts was harder. But it had to start somewhere. Elena Vasquez was waiting for him in the lobby. She looked different than she had last night, calmer, more certain. Like speaking up had unlocked something inside her that had been waiting to get out. Mr. Carter? Elena. I told you to come to my office Monday. I know, but I couldn't wait. She held out a folder. I've been working on something. All night. I thought you might want to see it. Marcus took the folder and opened it. Inside were pages of notes, handwritten, some typed. Names, dates, incidents. What is this? Everything I've seen. In 14 months at this hotel. Guests treated differently. Comments made by staff when they thought no one was listening. Complaints that were ignored or buried. Elena's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I should have reported it sooner. I should have said something. But I was scared. And now I'm angry. She looked at him with fierce eyes. What happened to you happens every day. Maybe not with handcuffs. Maybe not in front of cameras. But it happens. And I'm tired of pretending it doesn't. Marcus looked at the folder. 14 months of silence. 14 months of documented injustice, waiting for someone to care enough to listen. Elena, do you know what you've given me here? Evidence. A roadmap. He closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. I want you on the team that implements the new training program, not as an assistant, as a leader. Her eyes widened. Sir, I'm just a front desk clerk. You were a front desk clerk. Now you're someone who had the courage to speak when it cost something. He started walking toward the elevators, then paused. Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late. Elena stood frozen for a moment, watching him go. Then a smile broke across her face, small at first, then wider. She'd spent 14 months being invisible. Not anymore. That night, Marcus Carter sat alone in Suite 1708. The same suite he'd been denied entry to less than 24 hours ago. The same room where his reservation had mysteriously disappeared. The same space where someone had decided in a glance that he didn't belong. He ordered room service, a steak, medium rare, a glass of wine, simple, deliberate. When the knock came, he opened the door himself. The server, young, nervous, clearly aware of who he was, wheeled the cart inside with trembling hands. "Mr. Carter, sir, I'm so sorry about what happened. I wasn't here last night, but I saw the video, and I just want you to know that we're all—" "What's your name?" "Jerome, sir." "Jerome, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "In the time you've worked here, have you ever seen a guest treated the way I was treated last night?" Jerome hesitated. His eyes flickered toward the door, as if checking whether anyone was listening. "It's okay," Marcus said. "I'm asking because I want to know, not because I want to get anyone in trouble." Jerome swallowed. "Yes, sir. I've seen it. Not exactly like that, but similar. Guests who get extra questions, families who get moved to tables near the kitchen, people who get followed by security for no reason." He paused. "Mostly people who look like me, or you." Marcus nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "Can I ask you something, sir?" "Go ahead." "Is it really going to change? What happened last night, is it actually going to make things different? Or is it just going to be news for a week and then everyone forgets?" Marcus looked at the young man standing in front of him. 19, maybe 20 years old. Probably working this job to pay for school or help his family or save for a future he wasn't sure he'd ever reach. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "I'm going to try. But changing systems is hard. It takes time. And it takes people like you being willing to speak up when you see something wrong." Jerome nodded. "I can do that." "Good. Then we'll change it together." He signed the check, added a tip that made Jerome's eyes go wide, and watched the young man wheel the cart back out. Then he sat down alone with his steak and his wine and his thoughts. 50 million views, a CNN interview, a board meeting, a terminated employee calling to apologize, a young clerk handing him 14 months of documented injustice, and a server named Jerome asking the only question that mattered. Is it really going to change? Marcus didn't have an answer yet, but he was going to spend the rest of his life finding one. 3 days after the handcuffs, Marcus Carter stood in the employee cafeteria of the Regency Grand and looked at the faces staring back at him. 217 people. Housekeepers, bellhops, cooks, servers, maintenance workers, front desk clerks, security guards. All of them packed into a room that usually held half that number, standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear from the man who had just fired their bosses and turned their workplace into a national news story. He could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty, the unspoken question that hung over everything. "Am I next?" "I know what you're thinking," Marcus said. His voice carried across the room without a microphone. He'd learned decades ago that real authority didn't need amplification. "You're thinking about your mortgages, your kids' tuition, your car payments. You're wondering if you're going to walk out of here today with a job or a severance package." Silence. A few people shifted uncomfortably. "Let me be clear about something. What happened 3 nights ago wasn't about individual employees. It was about a system that made their behavior possible. A system that I built." He paused, letting that sink in. "I'm not here to fire more people. I'm here to fix what's broken." A hand went up in the back. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, wearing a housekeeper's uniform. "Yes." "Mr. Carter, my name is Destiny Williams. I've worked here for 2 years." Her voice shook, but she pushed through it. "With all due respect, I've heard a lot of CEOs talk about fixing systems and doing better. Usually that means we get a new poster in the break room and a mandatory webinar that everyone clicks through without watching. How is this going to be different? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus could feel the tension shift. This wasn't hostility. It was exhaustion. The exhaustion of people who had been promised change 100 times and seen it evaporate just as many. That's a fair question, Marcus said. And you deserve a real answer. He walked toward her, closing the distance between the podium and the back of the room. People parted to let him through. Destiny, can I tell you something? Yes, sir. My mother worked as a waitress for 18 years, same diner, same shift, 6 days a week. He stopped a few feet away from her. Every year her manager would announce some new initiative. Customer service training, efficiency improvements, team building exercises. And every year nothing actually changed. The tips stayed small. The hours stayed long. The customers who treated her like she was invisible kept coming back. Destiny's eyes softened slightly. I'm sorry about your mother. Don't be sorry. Be demanding. Marcus looked around the room. My mother taught me that the difference between real change and performance is accountability. Posters don't change behavior. Consequences do. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a new policy that goes into effect company-wide starting next Monday. Every Meridian property will have a dedicated dignity officer whose only job is to monitor how guests are treated. Mystery shoppers will visit every hotel at least once a month, and any employee who witnesses discrimination and reports it will receive a bonus equivalent to 1 month's salary. The room went silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Surprise, calculation, hope. You're going to pay us to snitch? Someone called out. Marcus smiled. I'm going to pay you to protect each other. There's a difference. Destiny raised her hand again. What about the people who've already seen things? Things that happened before last week. Elena Vasquez is building a task force to review past incidents. Anyone who has information can report it anonymously. No retaliation. No consequences for waiting until now to speak up. He looked directly at Destiny. The past wasn't safe for truth. I'm trying to make the future different. She nodded slowly. Okay. I'll believe it when I see it. That's all I'm asking. Marcus walked back to the front of the room. One more thing. I know some of you are angry at me. Angry that I came here undercover. Angry that I put your colleagues in a position to fail. Angry that your workplace is now famous for all the wrong reasons. He paused. I understand that anger. But I want you to ask yourselves something. If I hadn't come here that night, how long would it have taken for someone else to experience what I experienced? Someone who didn't own the building. Someone who couldn't fight back. Someone whose story would have ended with them being thrown out on the street, humiliated with no recourse and no witness. The room was completely still. That person exists, probably more than one, and the system I'm dismantling today protected their abusers. Marcus's voice hardened. That ends now. Not because it's good for business. Not because the internet is watching. Because it's right. He looked around one more time, meeting as many eyes as he could. I'm asking you to help me build something better, and I'm promising you that if you do, I will fight just as hard for you as I'm fighting for every guest who walks through those doors. Destiny Williams started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined her. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet, the applause washing over Marcus like a wave. He didn't smile. He didn't bow. He just stood there accepting it, knowing that applause was easy, and the real work hadn't even begun. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later. Marcus was in his office when Rachel walked in with the folder, her face carefully neutral, in the way it always got when she was about to deliver bad news. Sandra Whitmore filed this morning. Wrongful termination, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Marcus took the folder and flipped it open. How much? $12 million. He laughed. Actually laughed. $12 million. for putting me in handcuffs in my own hotel. Her lawyer is arguing that the termination was retaliatory, that she was following established security protocols, that you entrapped her by disguising your identity, entrapped her into being racist. That's not how they're framing it. Rachel sat down across from him. They're saying you deliberately created a confrontation for publicity purposes, that you provoked her response by refusing to provide additional identification, that any reasonable manager would have been suspicious given the circumstances. The circumstances being that I'm black. They're very carefully not saying that. Marcus closed the folder and tossed it on his desk. What's our legal team's recommendation? Settle, quietly, make it go away before it becomes a bigger story. And what do you think? Rachel was quiet for a moment. I think settling sends a message that there's something to hide. I think it tells every other employee in this company that if they discriminate against the right person, they can sue their way out of consequences. I think it's exactly what Sandra Whitmore is counting on. So we fight. We fight. Rachel nodded. But it's going to be ugly. Her lawyers are already leaking to the press. There's a narrative forming that you're a vindictive billionaire who ruined a working woman's life over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Marcus felt the old anger rising in his chest. She stood in my lobby and announced that people like me don't belong in a five-star hotel. She had security put me in handcuffs. She tried to erase my reservation from the system. And now she's the victim. That's how they're playing it. Marcus stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out below him, indifferent to the battles being fought in boardrooms and courthouses. You know what my mother used to say about people like Sandra Whitmore? What? She said, some folks are so used to being on top that equality feels like oppression. They've never had to think about how they treat people, never had consequences for their assumptions. And the moment someone holds them accountable, they act like they're being persecuted. That's going to resonate with a lot of people. It's going to infuriate a lot of others. Marcus turned back to face her. But I didn't get where I am by worrying about who I infuriate. File a countersuit. Every penny Sandra Whitmore is asking for. I want us to ask for double. And I want it to go to trial. Public. On the record. Let a jury decide who the real victim is. Rachel smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Keith Thompson's phone hadn't stopped buzzing in a week. The 17-year-old, who had live-streamed the confrontation in the Regency Grand lobby, was now, according to Twitter, a citizen journalist hero. The Washington Post had interviewed him. CNN had invited him to appear on a panel about social media and accountability. His follower count had jumped from 300 to 400,000. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and somewhere underneath all of it exhilarating. But tonight, sitting at the dinner table with his parents, Keith felt something else entirely. He felt tired. Baby, you need to eat something. His mother pushed a plate of chicken toward him. You've barely touched your food all week. I'm not hungry. You're never hungry anymore. You're always on that phone. Mom, people are counting on me. I've got messages from all over the country. People who've experienced the same thing as Mr. Carter. They're sharing their stories with me. They want someone to listen. His father set down his fork. Robert Thompson was 52 years old, a postal worker for 27 years, and he hadn't said much since the night his son came home at midnight, babbling about a video that was going to change everything. Keith? Yes, sir. Come with me. They walked out to the backyard where the evening air was cool and quiet, and far away from buzzing phones and viral videos. Robert sat down on the old wooden bench he'd built when Keith was a baby, and patted the space beside him. Keith sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. You remember what happened to me last month? Robert finally asked. Keith nodded. The traffic stop. 3 cops. Guns drawn. Face down on the asphalt for 20 minutes, for a broken taillight. Robert's voice was steady, but Keith could hear the weight beneath it. You know what I thought about lying there on that ground? What? You, your mother. Whether I was going to see you again. Robert turned to look at his son. 27 years I've been delivering mail in this town. 27 years of being a good citizen, paying my taxes, following every rule. And in that moment, none of it mattered. I was just another black man on the ground, hoping not to get shot. Keith felt his throat tighten. Dad, I'm sorry. I should have... Let me finish. Robert held up a hand. When I got home that night, I didn't tell you what really happened. I said they let me off with a warning. I said it wasn't a big deal. You know why I lied? Keith shook his head. Because I was ashamed. Not of what I did, of what was done to me. I spent my whole life trying to build something safe for this family, and in that moment I realized safety doesn't exist. Not for us. Not really. Robert's voice cracked. And I didn't want you to know that. I wanted you to still believe that if you work hard enough and follow the rules, the world will treat you fair. Keith's eyes were burning now. Dad? Then I saw that video. That man, Mr. Carter, he's got more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime. He owns the building he was standing in. And they still put him in handcuffs. Robert reached over and gripped his son's shoulder. That night you did something I couldn't do. You didn't look away. You didn't tell yourself it wasn't your business. You held up your phone and you said, "This isn't right." And you made the world see it. A tear slid down Keith's cheek. I didn't do anything special. I just recorded it. Recording it was everything. Robert's grip tightened. All my life I've been swallowing things, looking down, staying quiet, because that's what they taught us would keep us safe. But safety isn't the same as dignity. And you gave that man his dignity back. You gave everyone watching their dignity back, because they could finally see what we've always known. Keith wiped his face. I got a message from Mr. Carter. What did he say? He said to tell you that your story matters too. Robert was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick. Maybe it does. Maybe it's time I stop swallowing things. Keith looked at his father. The man who'd raised him, provided for him, taught him everything he knew about being a man, and saw something he'd never seen before. Not the stoic postal worker who never complained. Not the careful father who avoided conflict. He saw a man who had been carrying something heavy his whole life and was finally ready to set it down. Dad, would you do an interview? Tell your story. People need to hear it. Robert took a deep breath, let it out slowly. Yeah, he said finally. I think maybe they do. Elena Vasquez was working late when the email came through. She'd been working late every night since Mr. Carter had appointed her to the Dignity Initiative Task Force, reviewing incident reports, interviewing staff, building the framework for a training program that would eventually be rolled out across all 47 Meridian properties. It was exhausting. It was overwhelming. It was the most meaningful work she'd ever done. The email was from Sandra Whitmore. Elena stared at the sender's name for a full minute before opening it. Elena, I know you probably hate me. I would hate me too if I were you. But I need to say something, and I don't know any other way to say it. I've been watching the news. I've seen the interviews. I've seen the way people are talking about what happened that night, and I keep waiting to feel like they're wrong. Like they're exaggerating. Like I didn't really do what they're saying I did. But I did. I know I did. I've watched the video 100 times, and every time I watch it, I see the same thing. A woman who saw a black man in casual clothes and decided in 2 seconds that he was a threat. A woman who smiled while she ordered him handcuffed. A woman who announced to a room full of people that people like him don't belong. I keep telling myself I'm not racist. I've been telling myself that my whole life. But what I did that night, that was racism. There's no other word for it. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see who I was. And I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry I did it. Sorry I spent 7 years running that hotel and never once questioned the assumptions that led me to that moment. You spoke up when it mattered. I didn't. That's the difference between us. I don't know what happens next. My lawyer says we'll probably lose the lawsuit. My husband says we should move somewhere no one knows us. My daughter won't return my calls. But whatever happens, I wanted you to know you did the right thing. And I should have too. Sandra Elena read the email 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and called Marcus Carter. Sir, I need to show you something. It's 11 o'clock at night, Elena. I know. It's important. 20 minutes later, Marcus was standing in her office reading the same email on her computer screen. His face was unreadable. What do you want to do with this? Elena asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What do you think I should do? I don't know. Part of me thinks she's just trying to get sympathy for the lawsuit. Make herself look like she's had some kind of awakening so the jury goes easy on her. And the other part? Elena hesitated. The other part thinks this is what change actually looks like. Messy, uncomfortable, people realizing things about themselves they spent their whole lives avoiding. Marcus nodded slowly. My mother used to say that everyone's capable of growth. Even the people who hurt you. Especially them. Because carrying that hurt around is heavy. And sometimes people put it down not because they want forgiveness, but because they can't carry it anymore. So what do? We wait. If she's sincere, it'll show in her actions. If she's not, that'll show too. Marcus turned to leave, then paused at the door. Elena, can I ask you something? Of course. That night when you spoke up, were you scared? Terrified? What made you do it anyway? Elena thought about it. The moment. The decision. The feeling of her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. I kept thinking about my grandmother, she said finally. She crossed the border when she was 16, walked through the desert for 3 days, almost died twice, and she did it because she believed there was something better waiting on the other side, a place where she could be treated like a human being. Elena's voice caught. I thought about her standing in that lobby watching that man get handcuffed, and I knew she would have spoken up, even if it cost her everything. So I did. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. She died last year. But she taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Hold on to that. We're going to need a lot more of it before this is over. He walked out, leaving Elena alone with her computer screen and the email from a woman who had once tried to erase her. She read it one more time. Then she closed the window and got back to work. The countersuit was filed on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, it was the top story on every news outlet in the country. Hotel CEO countersues fired manager, seeks $24 million in damages. The headlines wrote themselves. The cable news panels exploded with debate. Social media became a battlefield. Marcus watched it all unfold from his office, Rachel by his side, as the world once again turned its attention to a confrontation in a hotel lobby that had lasted less than 30 minutes. Public opinion is running about 70-30 in your favor, Rachel reported, scrolling through her tablet. The 30% are mostly people who think you should have just settled quietly, or who think the whole thing was staged. Let them think what they want. There's something else. Rachel hesitated. Sandra Whitmore's daughter gave an interview to a local news station. She says she hasn't spoken to her mother in 2 weeks. Says she's ashamed to share her last name. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about his own daughter Simone, about the conversation they'd finally had 2 days ago, both of them crying by the end of it. About how she'd said, "Dad, I'm so proud of you, but I'm also so angry. Angry that this is still happening. Angry that it had to happen to you for anyone to pay attention. Mr. Carter." He opened his eyes. "Sorry, What were you saying? Sandra's daughter. The interview. Some people are saying it proves Sandra is suffering consequences. Others are saying you're destroying a family. I'm not destroying anything. I'm holding someone accountable for their actions. The consequences are hers to live with. I know. I'm just telling you what's out there. Marcus stood and walked to the window. The same window he'd stared out of 100 times in the past week, watching the city move on, while his life had become something unrecognizable. Do you know what I think about Rachel? Every time I see another headline or another debate or another panel of talking heads arguing about what happened. What? I think about all the people this happened to before me. All the people it's happening to right now while everyone's distracted by my story. All the people it'll happen to tomorrow and next week and next year. He turned to face her. My case has lawyers and press coverage and a viral video with 100 million views. What about the cases that don't have any of that? What about the people who get thrown out of hotels and restaurants and stores every single day and no one ever hears about it? Rachel was quiet. That's why I can't settle. That's why I have to fight this publicly. Because if I take the quiet payout, I become just another rich person who bought their way out of discomfort. But if I stand up in a courtroom and make them prove their case in front of the whole world, maybe it makes it a little bit harder for the next Sandra Whitmore to convince herself that what she's doing is okay. The trial date is set for 8 months from now. Then we have 8 months to prepare. And if we lose, Marcus smiled, but there was steel behind it. We won't lose, because we have something Sandra Whitmore doesn't. What's that? The truth, and 100 million witnesses. That night, Marcus Carter did something he hadn't done in months. He called his daughter. Simone answered on the second ring. Dad, is everything okay? Everything's fine. I just wanted to hear your voice. A pause. Are you sure you're okay? You never just call to talk. Maybe I should start. He heard her exhale on the other end of the line. I've been watching all the coverage, the countersuit, the interviews. It's everywhere. I know. How are you holding up, really? Marcus thought about the question. How was he holding up? He'd been handcuffed in public. He'd become the center of a national controversy. He'd fired employees, filed lawsuits, given interviews, launched initiatives, and spent more time in the past week thinking about race and dignity and justice than he had in the past decade. And somehow underneath all of it, he felt lighter than he had in years. I'm tired, he said, but I'm okay. Actually okay. Not saying it so you won't worry, okay. What changed? I stopped pretending. Stopped acting like I had to be perfect to be taken seriously. Stopped swallowing the things that hurt because I thought that's what successful people do. He paused. I spent 30 years building an empire by being the calmest person in every room. And it worked. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that calm isn't the same as silent, and dignity isn't something you earn by not making waves. Simone was quiet for a moment. Grandma would be proud of you. Marcus felt his throat tighten. You think so? I know so. She used to tell me that you were the strongest person she'd ever met. Not because you never got knocked down, but because you always got back up. And you never let it make you bitter. I'm a little bitter right now. Simone laughed. You're entitled to some bitterness, Dad. You got handcuffed in your own hotel. I think the bitterness pass is fully activated. Marcus laughed too. For the first time in a week, it felt real. I love you, baby girl. I love you too, Dad. And for what it's worth, what you're doing matters, not just for you, for all of us. For everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong somewhere. That's what I keep telling myself. Keep telling yourself, because it's true. They talked for another hour, about her work, about his plans, about Simone's grandmother and the lessons she'd taught them both, about what it meant to be black and successful and still vulnerable to the same indignities as everyone else. By the time they hung up, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not naive hope. Not the hope that everything would magically get better, but the hope that comes from knowing you're not fighting alone, that the people you love are in your corner, that the work you're doing matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He set down his phone and looked out the window one last time. Somewhere out there, 100 million people had watched him get handcuffed. 100 million people had seen what happened when prejudice met power. Now it was time to show them what happened next. 8 months felt like 8 years. Marcus Carter had spent them preparing. Depositions, strategy meetings, mock trials. Every day another document to review, another witness to interview, another argument to refine. The lawsuit had consumed his life, but he refused to let it consume his spirit. The morning of the trial he woke at 4 a.m. He didn't need an alarm. His body knew. After 30 years of high-stakes negotiations, his internal clock had learned to recognize the days that mattered. He showered, dressed in a charcoal suit that his mother would have loved, simple, dignified, understated. No flashy tie, no expensive cufflinks, just a man ready to tell his truth. Rachel was waiting in the lobby of his building when he came down. The media is already outside the courthouse. Cameras everywhere. They're expecting a crowd. Good, let them watch. Marcus. She hesitated. Whatever happens today, we're going to win. I know, I just wanted to say, I've worked for a lot of powerful people. Most of them would have settled this months ago, taken the quiet exit, protected their reputation. She met his eyes. You're different, and I'm proud to be on your side. Marcus nodded. Thank you, Rachel, for everything. They walked out together into a morning that would change everything. The courthouse steps were chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Protesters held signs on both sides, some supporting Marcus, some supporting Sandra Whitmore. A line of police officers kept the two groups separated, but the tension was electric. Marcus walked through it all without breaking stride. At the top of the steps, he paused and turned to face the cameras. He hadn't planned to speak, but something made him stop. Mr. Carter, do you have a statement? He looked at the sea of faces, the reporters with their microphones, the protesters with their signs, the ordinary people who had stopped on their way to work just to witness this moment. I have one thing to say, he said, his voice carrying across the noise. What happens in that courtroom today isn't about me. It's about every person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. Every person who's been judged by their appearance instead of their character. Every person who's been told in 1,000 small ways that they're less than. He paused. Today we find out if justice is real, or if it's just a word we use to make ourselves feel better. He turned and walked into the courthouse, leaving the chaos behind. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, media in a designated section, cameras rolling. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made it hard to breathe. Marcus took his seat at the plaintiff's table. His legal team surrounded him, 3 lawyers, who had spent the past 8 months building a case that they believed was unassailable. Across the aisle, Sandra Whitmore sat with her own attorneys. She looked different than Marcus remembered. Thinner, older. The past 8 months had carved lines into her face that hadn't been there before. Their eyes met briefly. Marcus saw something in hers that surprised him. Not defiance, not anger. Something closer to exhaustion. The look of someone who had been fighting a battle they knew they couldn't win. He looked away. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Patricia Morrison took her seat, a 63-year-old black woman with 30 years on the bench and a reputation for fairness that both sides had agreed on. This court is now in session. The matter before us is Whitmore versus Meridian Hospitality Group and the counterclaim of Meridian Hospitality Group versus Whitmore. Judge Morrison looked at both tables. Counsel, are you ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor. Both sides answered. Then let's begin. Sandra Whitmore's attorney went first. His name was Richard Coleman, a veteran litigator with silver hair and a voice like honey poured over gravel. He'd made his career defending corporations against discrimination lawsuits. The irony of him now representing someone claiming wrongful termination wasn't lost on anyone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "this case is not about racism. It's about a man who deliberately deceived his own employees, created a confrontation, and then used his power to destroy a woman's career." He walked toward the jury box, making eye contact with each member. Sandra Whitmore worked in the hospitality industry for 22 years. 7 of those years at the Regency Grand. She had an impeccable record. No complaints, no disciplinary actions. Employee of the Year twice. He paused. And then one night, a man she had never met walked into her lobby, dressed like he'd just come from a construction site, claimed to have a reservation that didn't appear in the system, and refused to provide additional identification when asked. Coleman turned to point at Marcus. That man was Marcus Carter, the owner of the hotel. But he didn't tell anyone that. He deliberately concealed his identity. He wanted to see how the staff would react to someone who looked like they didn't belong. His voice hardened. And when they reacted exactly the way anyone would have reacted to a suspicious situation, he destroyed them. Fired them on the spot, in public, humiliated them in front of millions of people. He walked back to his table. Sandra Whitmore isn't a racist. She's a scapegoat, a convenient villain in a story that Marcus Carter manufactured to make himself look like a hero. He faced the jury one last time. Don't let him get away with it. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face neutral. This was the narrative he'd expected. The reframing. The attempt to turn the victim into the villain. Now it was his turn. His attorney, Veronica Hayes, was the opposite of Coleman in every way. Young, sharp, black. She'd grown up in the same neighborhood as Marcus's mother, and she'd taken this case pro bono because she believed in what it represented. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "you're going to hear a lot of words in this courtroom over the next few days. Words like protocol and procedure and reasonable suspicion. Words designed to make what happened in that hotel lobby sound like business as usual." She walked to the center of the room. "But I want you to remember something. There's video. You've seen it. The whole world has seen it. And no amount of legal language can change what's on that video." She clicked a remote, and the courtroom screens lit up with the footage. The lobby, the confrontation, Sandra Whitmore's smirk, the handcuffs clicking shut. "People like him don't belong here." The words echoed through the courtroom. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. "People like him," Veronica repeated. "Not people who don't have reservations, not people who refuse to cooperate. People like him." She turned to face Sandra. "What kind of people, Ms. Whitmore? What exactly did you mean by that?" Sandra's attorney objected. "Your Honor, counsel is asking a question of the defendant outside of proper examination." Sustained. "Ms. Hayes, save your questions for testimony." Veronica nodded, but the point had been made. Marcus Carter didn't manufacture a confrontation. He simply existed in a space where someone decided he didn't belong. And that someone, she pointed at Sandra, made a choice. Not to verify his reservation. Not to give him the benefit of the doubt. But to assume the worst. To call security. To put a paying guest in handcuffs. She walked toward the jury. "You're going to be asked to decide whether that was racism or reasonable caution. And I want you to ask yourselves one question. Would any of this have happened if Marcus Carter had been white?" The courtroom was silent. "The defense wants you to believe this is complicated. It's not. A man walked into a hotel. He had a reservation. He was denied service and arrested. Because of how he looked." She paused. "That's not protocol. That's not procedure. That's discrimination. And it's time for it to have consequences." The trial lasted 6 days. Witnesses testified. Documents were entered into evidence. Both sides made their arguments point by point, objection by objection. Elena Vasquez took the stand and described what she'd seen that night. The way Sandra had looked at Marcus, the tone of her voice, the smile that had never reached her eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing, Elena said. She'd made up her mind the moment he walked in. Everything after that was just justification. Tyler Jensen testified too, called by the defense as a character witness for Sandra. But under cross-examination, he crumbled. Mr. Jensen, you said in your deposition that you referred to Mr. Carter as someone who pulls scams. Is that correct? Tyler's face reddened. I was following my manager's lead. So when you said people like him pull this all the time, you were just echoing Ms. Whitmore's attitude. I guess so. Yes. And what made you think Mr. Carter was running a scam? Tyler was silent. Mr. Jensen. He didn't look like our usual guests. Didn't look like them how? Another long pause. I don't know. He just didn't fit. Didn't fit because of his clothes or because of something else. Tyler's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen enough. On the fifth day, Sandra Whitmore took the stand. She looked different up close. Smaller somehow. The confidence that had radiated from her in the video was gone, replaced by something fragile. Her attorney walked her through her version of events. The suspicious guest. The reservation that couldn't be found. The reasonable concerns about fraud. I was just doing my job, Sandra said, her voice trembling. I had no idea who he was. If I had known... But you didn't know, her attorney said. And you made a judgment call based on the information available to you. Yes, exactly. Then it was Veronica's turn. She approached the witness stand, slowly letting the silence build. Ms. Whitmore, in your 7 years at the Regency Grand, how many guests did you have arrested? I don't know exactly. More than 10. No. More than 5. No. Maybe 3 or 4. And of those 3 or 4, how many were black? Sandra's face went pale. I don't remember. But let me help you remember. Veronica picked up a document from her table. We obtained records from the Regency Grand Security Office. In 7 years, you authorized security intervention for 4 guests. All 4 were black. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. That's a coincidence. Is it? Veronica set the document down. Ms. Whitmore, you said in your direct examination that Mr. Carter didn't look like your usual guests. What did you mean by that? He was dressed casually. We're a 5-star hotel. Most of our guests dress appropriately. Appropriately. Veronica let the word hang. And when you said people like him don't belong here, what did you mean by that? Sandra's eyes darted to her attorney. I meant people who don't have proper reservations. People who might be trying to take advantage. You said people like him. Not people like that. Not people who do this. You said people like him. What kind of people, Ms. Whitmore? I didn't mean... What kind of people? Sandra's composure shattered. Tears streamed down her face. I don't know. I don't know why I said it. I've been asking myself for 8 months, and I don't have an answer. The courtroom went silent. Veronica let the moment breathe. Then quietly, maybe that's the most honest thing you've said all day. Closing arguments came on day 6. Coleman went first, painting Sandra as a victim of circumstance, a dedicated employee caught in an impossible situation. He talked about careers destroyed and lives ruined, and the danger of letting wealthy men use their power to punish anyone who inconveniences them. Then Veronica rose. She didn't walk to the jury box. She stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to address everyone present. The jury, the gallery, the cameras that would carry her words to millions. 8 months ago, Marcus Carter walked into a hotel he owned and was treated like a criminal. That's not in dispute. You've seen the video. You've heard the testimony. You know what happened." She paused. "The defense wants you to believe this was about protocol, about reasonable suspicion, about a mistake anyone could have made." Her voice hardened. "But mistakes don't come with smiles. Mistakes don't come with handcuffs. Mistakes don't come with public announcements that people like him don't belong." She turned to face the jury directly. "This was racism, plain and simple. Not the hood-wearing, cross-burning kind that's easy to condemn. The quiet kind, the polite kind, the kind that hides behind policy and procedure and reasonable doubt. The kind that lets people convince themselves they're not prejudiced while they put a black man in handcuffs for the crime of existing in a space they've decided isn't his." Her voice softened. Marcus Carter didn't sue because he wanted money. He sued because he wanted accountability. Because he wanted to stand in a courtroom and say, "This happened, it was wrong. And there have to be consequences." Not just for him, for everyone who's ever been in his position without the power to fight back. She walked to the jury box and placed her hands on the railing. "You have a chance today to send a message, to say that dignity isn't optional, that treating people with respect isn't something you do only when you know they're important, that the color of someone's skin doesn't determine whether they belong somewhere." She straightened. "Fine for Marcus Carter. Not because he's a CEO, not because he's wealthy, because he's right, and because justice demands it." She sighed. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Marcus spent them in a small conference room staring at the wall thinking about his mother, about Simone, about Keith and his father and Elena and Jerome and all the people whose stories had intersected with his over the past 8 months. Rachel sat with him, not speaking, just present. At 4:47 p.m. the bailiff knocked on the door. "They're back." The courtroom felt different now. Charged. Electric. Marcus took his seat and watched the jury file in. 12 faces, carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Judge Morrison addressed the foreperson. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the matter of Whitmore versus Meridian Hospitality Group, how do you find?" "We find in favor of the defendant. Ms. Whitmore's claims are dismissed." A murmur swept through the gallery. Marcus exhaled slowly. "And on the counterclaim of Meridian Hospitality Group versus Whitmore." The foreperson looked directly at Marcus. "We find in favor of the plaintiff. We award damages in the amount of $12 million. The courtroom erupted. Cheers. Gasps. Sandra Whitmore's head dropping into her hands. Her attorney's face going gray. Reporters frantically typing. People hugging. Crying. Marcus sat very still. $12 million. The exact amount Sandra had sued him for. Not a penny more, not a penny less. A symbolic verdict, a statement. Veronica leaned over. "We won, Marcus. We actually won." He nodded, but the word felt strange. Won. What had he won exactly? Money he didn't need. Vindication that couldn't undo what had been done. He looked across the aisle at Sandra Whitmore. She was sobbing now, her attorney's arm around her shoulders. 8 months ago, she had smiled while he was handcuffed. Now she was broken. He didn't feel satisfaction. He didn't feel triumph. He felt tired, and somewhere beneath the exhaustion, something that might have been peace. The press conference was held on the courthouse steps. Cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions. The whole world watching. Marcus stood at the microphone and waited for the noise to settle. "I'm not going to make a long statement," he said. "The jury spoke today. They saw the evidence. They heard the testimony, and they reached a verdict that I believe reflects the truth of what happened." He paused. "I want to be clear about something. This lawsuit was never about money. Every penny of the damages awarded today will go to establishing the Carter Foundation for Dignity, a nonprofit dedicated to fighting discrimination in the hospitality industry and beyond. We'll fund legal aid for victims who can't afford attorneys. We'll train companies to recognize and address bias. We'll build a world where what happened to me becomes harder and harder to ignore." A reporter shouted, "Mr. Carter, what do you say to Sandra Whitmore?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I say what I've said from the beginning. I don't hate Sandra Whitmore. I don't wish her harm. She made choices that night that reflected something broken, not just in her, but in a system that taught her those choices were acceptable." He looked directly into the cameras. "My hope is that this verdict helps fix that system, not through punishment, but through accountability. Not through revenge, but through change." "What about the people who said this was all a publicity stunt?" Marcus smiled, but there was no joy in it. "I got handcuffed in my own hotel. I spent 8 months in litigation. My family has been threatened. My businesses have been boycotted. I've been called everything from a hero to a fraud." He shook his head. "If this was a publicity stunt, it was a terrible one. What this was, what it's always been, is a man standing up and saying enough. And today a jury agreed." He turned to walk away, then stopped. "One more thing. To every person watching this, who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong somewhere in a hotel, a restaurant, a school, a workplace, anywhere, I want you to know something." He faced the cameras one last time. "Your dignity isn't negotiable. It's not something you earn by dressing the right way or speaking the right way or knowing the right people. It's yours. It's always been yours, and no one, no policy, no person, no system has the right to take it from you." He walked down the steps and into a waiting car, leaving the chaos behind. That night, Marcus Carter sat alone in Suite 1708 of the Regency Grand. The same room he'd been denied access to 8 months ago, the same room where everything had begun. His phone buzzed, a text from Simone. "Watch the whole thing. I'm so proud of you, Dad. Grandma would be too. Love you." He typed back, "Love you more, baby girl. Always." Another buzz. "Keith. Mr. Carter." "My dad and I watched the verdict together." He cried. "First time I've ever seen him cry. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for not giving up." Marcus set the phone down and walked to the window. The city stretched out below him, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Somewhere out there, people were going about their lives, eating dinner, watching TV, putting their kids to bed. Most of them would never know his name, would never think about what had happened in this hotel or why it mattered. And that was okay. Because change didn't come from one verdict, or one man, or one moment. It came from thousands of small choices made by thousands of ordinary people every single day. The choice to speak up when something was wrong. The choice to treat strangers with dignity. The choice to believe that the world could be better, and to act like it. Marcus had made his choice 8 months ago, standing in a lobby with handcuffs on his wrists. He'd chosen to fight, to stand, to refuse to be erased. And now, standing at this window, looking out at a world that was still broken, but maybe a little less broken than before, he made another choice. He chose hope. Not naive hope. Not the hope that everything would magically get better. But the hope that his daughter would inherit a world slightly more just than the one he'd grown up in. The hope that Keith's children would face fewer barriers than Keith had faced. The hope that somewhere right now, a young black kid was watching the news and thinking, if he can do it, maybe I can too. His phone buzzed one more time. Rachel. Final tally. 247 million people watched the verdict live or within the first hour. It's the most watched civil rights trial since the 1990s. The foundation website has already received 50,000 donation pledges. And Marcus. You should know, 3 major hotel chains have announced they're adopting the Dignity Initiative protocols voluntarily. They're calling it the Carter Standard. The Carter Standard. His mother would have laughed at that. Would have said something like, "Baby, don't let it go to your head. You still need to take out the trash." He smiled, feeling her presence, like he hadn't in years. "I did it, Mama," he said quietly, to the window, to the city, to wherever she was. "I stood up, just like you taught me." The silence that answered wasn't empty. It was full of everything she'd ever given him, every lesson, every sacrifice, every moment of love disguised as discipline. He was still standing, and he would keep standing for as long as it took until the world caught up with what should have been true all along. 1 year later, Marcus Carter stood in a different lobby, not the Regency Grand. A new hotel in a new city opening its doors for the first time. The Carter Dignity Hotel, the first of what would become a chain, dedicated to the principles he'd fought for. Every employee trained in bias recognition. Every guest treated with respect, regardless of appearance. Every room a sanctuary where dignity wasn't negotiable. Elena Vasquez stood beside him now, the chief dignity officer of the entire Meridian chain. Keith Thompson was there too, now 19, working as a paid intern while he finished his journalism degree. Robert Thompson had come with his son, standing tall in a suit he'd bought for the occasion. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was simple. No speeches, no fanfare, just Marcus holding a pair of golden scissors ready to open a door. A reporter called out, "Mr. Carter, any final words?" Marcus looked at the crowd, the employees, the guests, the cameras, the faces of people who had been following this story for over a year. "Just one thing," he said. "A year ago, I walked into a hotel and was told I didn't belong. Today, I'm opening a hotel where everyone belongs. That's not revenge. That's not victory." He smiled. "That's progress." He cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded. And Marcus Carter walked through the doors of a future he had built one choice at a time, into a world that was finally starting to look like the one his mother had always believed was possible. Dignity doesn't shout. It endures. And it always, always wins.